Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 302 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the common conundrum of leaders wondering how open and honest should they be with their team. And there's two different aspects to this. The first one is when it comes to information that you have access to as a leader that maybe your team doesn't. But it's also about your emotions. How open should you be with your emotions, thoughts, and feelings? So let's get into this tricky topic right now. Before we get started with this episode, I want to just remind you that I'm running some online Understand Your Values sessions. These are small online sessions. On the 12th of November, I'm running two of them, a morning and an evening session that hopefully suits a wide variety of time zones. The idea is I want to help you understand your values and what they mean for your leadership in a small group setting, which is going to be nice and supportive and open to lots of different conversation about values. And it's going to be really cool. Small groups, you'll get access to my values workbook to work through during the sessions. You'll also get access to the online course I have on values as a reference for later if you need to refresh the concepts later on as well. So those sessions are $127 Australian. You can book in now on the show notes page. There's a link, thoughtfulleader.com/podcast/302. I really encourage you to get along and book in while there's still some spots available. All right. So there's a common conundrum in leadership, and I work with quite a few leaders on this one. And the conundrum is, how open and honest should I be with my team? And as I mentioned in the intro, there's a couple of different sections to this. The first one is, how open should I be with information? And how open should I be with my emotions or thoughts and feelings? Now, this can be a challenge because it's natural to want to share information openly and be honest and open and transparent. And I find that sometimes thoughtful leaders in particular get caught with this challenge is because they want to be helpful to their team. They want to feel close to their team and they want to build those bonds with their team. And it can be quite unhelpful or maybe even disrespectful if you feel like you're holding information back from your team. So that's one reason why I think thoughtful leaders can get caught here. Another reason is that leadership can feel quite isolating. Like you have to make decisions and you get access to information that may be confidential in nature and you're not allowed to share it. And sometimes this sense of isolation means thoughtful leaders will feel compelled to become closer to their teams. You know, they want to be part of the gang. It doesn't feel nice to be by yourself and isolated. So this is where some leaders can sort of fall foul of this and become too close to their teams and maybe gossip a bit or be too open about their thoughts and information and feelings as well. And the third reason why thoughtful leaders sometimes get caught is because they think about honesty and transparency. And they say, well, I want to be honest because good leaders are honest and I want to be transparent with my team and give them all the information. And this is an interesting one. And obviously, honesty is one of the top leadership characteristics that people are looking for in their leaders, according to a bunch of research done by some researchers called Kouzes and Posner in their book, The Leadership Challenge. Now, every time they've done this research, number one, the leadership characteristics that's always come back as number one is honesty. So leaders can sometimes get caught out going, well, I want to be honest with my team. I need to be honest with my team at all times because it's a great way to build trust. And while this is true, there's a little bit of a caveat to that. And to dig into this a bit more, I want to talk about the difference between transparency and honesty. So there is a difference here, and I think it's quite nuanced, but if you were extremely transparent, then you would be giving your team all the information you have access to. You would be providing them with all the information. And if you were being honest, you would be telling the truth. Now, there's a difference here. Some people get these confused or mixed up as the same thing. Now, as a leader, I don't believe you have an obligation to be fully transparent with your team. So when it comes to the performance of other employees or maybe confidential things that you've heard in your workplace about upcoming restructures or big changes that are happening in your company, you are not obliged to tell your team members everything that's going on. And sometimes there may be even legal or human resources sort of legislation or rules that prevent that. So, what's a leader to do? Well, I don't think a leader has to be fully transparent, but they should be honest. And here comes the difference. So, when you're communicating information, let's say you have access to some information about an upcoming change in your company and it's going to affect some people. There might be some teams that are restructured, and you know a little bit of detail about this because you've been told about it. Now, if you were being fully transparent, you would tell your team absolutely every piece of information that you have, which could cause some bad consequences in terms of rumors and people getting upset, maybe demotivation, all those bad things as well. You might even get in trouble because you're not meant to talk about it. Now, so you have access to this information. So fully transparent would be just telling them everything, but you can be honest without being fully transparent. And let me explain this one. So let's say you said to your team, I don't feel comfortable telling you this information right now. Here's a time where I'll be able to give you more information. Now that's honest. If you don't feel comfortable divulging some information, then that's being honest, but it's not being fully transparent. Now, another way to do it might be, look, I'm not going to tell you this information right now because there's confidentiality involved, which means you're not able to have access to the information at this point. Now, in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be able to communicate more openly about it. But for now, I have to keep it to myself. Now, that's honest. Now, what wouldn't be honest is if you said something like, oh, I don't know the answer to that question, or I can't tell you that information. Because we all know that if you have the information, you can tell me about it. So that's not being honest. So there's a nuance in language here. If you say things like, I don't feel comfortable, or I'm unable to tell you that due to confidentiality, and if those things are true, then you are actually being honest without being fully transparent. So I think that's a great way to go to stay true to that spirit of honesty without having to tell your team members absolutely everything. So let's move on to the second conundrum here, which was openness when it comes to emotions. So this might be, your thoughts and feelings of frustrations or things you're worried about. So how open should you be with your team? Well, and this is a challenging one because to some degree, as leaders, we all feel a bit worried about things that might happen or might go wrong, or we feel frustrated about certain things that aren't happening in our workplace or are happening. And so it can feel nice to confide in your team and be open and tell them, hey, I'm feeling this feeling at the moment. Now, there's a couple of challenges here. The first one is if you're too open. So if you're too open and you're completely open when it comes to your feelings and your frustrations and your worries, for example, then your team may start to lose credibility because they might say, well, they're telling me all the time that they're worried. Should I be worried? Maybe my leader's not cut out for that. Maybe I shouldn't follow them because they don't seem confident, right? There's such a thing as too much openness when it comes to emotions and showing that vulnerability. On the other hand, you could have a situation where you don't show any emotions and you don't open up at all about what your worries or concerns are. Now, many times what I find when leaders are like this is they come across as unapproachable and unavailable. And it means people can lose trust in them. It also means that people aren't willing to speak to them about their own emotions and thoughts because they feel like the leader's not interested. So there's a benefit in being vulnerable and open because sometimes you get that back in return. People are more likely to share information and their concerns and fears and worries with you, or maybe they made a mistake. They're more likely to share that stuff with you if you share something of yourself beforehand, right? So you're creating that safe space where they feel like, oh, okay, I can confide in this leader. So once again, it's all really about balance here, right? It's about being open so you can build trust by being vulnerable, but not so open that you lose that credibility. And Brené Brown is a really good resource to look for here. So Brené Brown is a researcher when it comes to vulnerability and shame, those sort of topics. So I'll leave a link on the show notes page to her website, thoughtfulleader.com/podcast/302 will be where that show notes page is. So you can check her stuff out. She's really good. Okay. So we've talked about being honest and being transparent, and there's a difference here, right? But another thing I would recommend for thoughtful leaders like you is to find trusted colleagues at your level where you feel you can speak openly and honestly. And if you have a good relationship with your own boss, that can be really positive as well, because you can talk about your concerns and not be worried about telling people information they shouldn't have or coming across as less credible, for example. So I think it's good to build a network of trusted colleagues at your level where you can speak openly and feel like you have that support and sounding board, so that you have that support and you don't feel like you're isolated and going it alone just by yourself. And I think that's a really valuable thing to do, to cultivate those trusting relationships. So you are not just isolated and feeling like you've got no support, because then you are more likely to fall foul of this temptation to get really close with your team members and maybe share too much information and say things that you probably shouldn't about your frustrations and things like that. So finding trusted colleagues at your level is super important. Now, I'm interested in what you think about this topic, being open and honest with your team. How do you balance it? I'm keen to hear your comments. thoughtfulleader.com/podcast/302 is the show notes page where you can leave a comment. And don't forget to check out my online value sessions, which I'll be running on the 12th of November that I mentioned earlier. Go to the show notes page, book your spot. There's limited spots available. It'll be really valuable, great sessions, I think. So come along and join the process and build that foundation for your leadership by understanding your personal values better. Thank you very much for listening today. I really appreciate it. And keep up the thoughtful leadership, of course, and I'll be back next week.